It is Friday, March 19th, 2020. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was yet another non-virtual get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Friday, although we did not do any Jiu-Jitsu today. No, not even any working out. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a miserable day. I didn't even go fishing today. It's like, terrible. I mean, it was funny because it was sunny for just a very, very short period of time. And, I don't know, like an hour or two. And up here we tend to call those sucker holes. Because it's just long enough for you to, like, get all of your shit together, get it all in the vehicle, get in the vehicle, go to wherever it is that you're going to go, launch, get out onto the water, start fishing, and then rain. You know, and that's just the way it hashes out. You know, I don't know if there's, like, you know, some key to the universe that, you know, it makes these little pockets available for you to fall into, but they actually have a term for it because it happens so often up here. But anyway, so yeah, it's been a relatively slow week for me altogether, honestly. Not being able to do jiu-jitsu is like, it's inhibited a lot of things. But fortunately, I am feeling myself on the other side of it. And, you know, I was out for a brief period today, and I did do a little bit of stuff outside. And when I did, I felt pretty good. I mean, like really, really good. And so, I think that by the time I actually do get back to jiu-jitsu, I'm gonna be in all right shape. You know, I didn't get in any cardio today, and I plan to resolve that at some point, possibly after the show. Get the old mat out and do a little footwork, do a little rolling around. But I do plan to go back next week. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I'm over this thing. And it's funny because I got bit by a mosquito or something right on the same vicinity. So it's like it looks like the same thing because that same area has been all swollen because of, you know, ringworm. But anyway, yeah. So it's like, what the fuck is... Oh, it's fucking mosquito bite. So anyway, like I said, I envision that I'll be getting back potentially next week. I mean, if not Monday, or if not Saturday, most certainly Monday. You know, I could conceivably go back tomorrow, but 1 or 2 more days isn't going to kill me, and I would like to start on Monday. So yeah, that's been my week. It just... chomping at the bit, wanting to get back to training and getting back to that, and finding other things to do instead. And this week I've been fishing this one place, but there's going to be a tournament on it relatively soon. So I didn't want to continue fishing in that place and then, you know, then get called up by somebody who wants to fish it with me for the tournament and not being able to do that because I'd been fishing. But I didn't get any calls on that. So, you know, I'm thinking maybe tomorrow when the tournament's on, I'll go to my areas and fish, and if their fish happens to be on the same area that I'm fishing, well, then they're just going to be kind of assed out. Yeah, I hate being that way about it, but you know what? They didn't call me. Fuck them. You know, they had the opportunity to pair me up with somebody, and if the opportunity didn't make itself available, well, you know, whatever. I'm not going to hold it against them, but at the same time, if I don't have to not fish it, I'm going to fish it. I've been having pretty good luck there. You know, the other day when I went out, it was just absolutely abominable fucking weather, man. It's just terrible. And it was one of those things that I was talking about, like a sucker hole kind of, where when we started, it was calm. You know, a little bit of a drizzle here and there, a little gust of wind, no big deal. And then just when we got on to where we were fishing, or where we had planned on going to fish, by the time we got there, the fucking wind was going 15 miles an hour, the rain was going sideways, it's fucking dark skies, it's not going to let up anytime soon. Got white caps, 2-foot white caps out there. And you know, I had been planning on launching my float tube after my friend had departed, because he hadn't planned to be there for the duration, and I did. But as it was, man, I just wasn't even dressed for the weather that was happening. You know, I mean, he was prepared, and I felt kind of bad for him there. But yeah, I wanted to get out of that shit as quickly as I possibly could. I had probably the thinnest pair of sweats that I own, and like 2, maybe 3 layers up top, and it wasn't enough. I needed a fucking heavy jacket, you know, my tights, maybe some long socks, my neoprenes. That would have been really nice. And my partner was all dressed like that. So, like I said, I feel kind of bad, because I'm like, dude, this is unfishable. Whereas he could have endured it. You know, he was all rain geared out. He was ready for that shit. So, and it's funny, because I've lived here a lot longer than he has. So, if anybody should be ill prepared for it, it'd be me. But it's because he's actually from Colorado. So it's like, he's used to it being that way, if not worse. But yeah, so kind of a lame week. I envision that it'll pick up next week, though. It's kind of an exciting tale out at the end of it, so yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down with some music and just get the ball rolling quick and going with it. And as far as where we're going to go, of course, we have not selected a first dance yet. But I am feeling the need for a little bit of a little bit of body count. And I had not played this song in a while, and so here it is. Carnivore, First Dance, here on Coin Metal. And that was Corrosion of Conformity with Buried. So, as far as what we're going to get into today, got a whole bunch of tabs open in the browser. And I actually did do a little bit of plotting and kind of figured a general direction I wanted to go into. And it's funny, I was in the Verge chan and the main chan, not off in some backwoods somewhere. Anyway, we were talking about currencies, or at least they were, and somebody, I guess, had stipulated that there would only ever be, there would be a point where all of this would rinse out and there would only be like a couple cryptocurrencies left. Personally, I think this is all bullshit. You know, there's been a lot of that energy that was initially put into developing altcoins, and then it shifted to developing things that will go on to Ethereum. And we've seen like this, the majority of the push being put, and the focus can only be drawn for so long, but being put on things that are dependent upon other existing networks. And while it's doable, and it might even be cheaper and more efficient or whatever, initially, over time, the competition for that same block space, because we have made it a competition for block space, has made it something that can become monopolizable, meaning that some entities such as, say, MasterCard or Bank of America or Visa or Goldman Sachs could become the dominant player in the transaction processing end of it, because they will be able to afford transaction fees that most of the people that are currently involved in it cannot. Not even in projected terms. You know, meaning that there'll be a time that they'll hit, it's a time threshold that they'll hit where, you know, those transaction fees are going to be really, really steep. And they're going to get to a point where even the people that are currently involved, even the well-established parties right now, will no longer be able to afford to transact directly on the network. And this is just an eventuality. It's one of those things that if we maintain the current development path for Bitcoin, that it'll go this way. Personally, I believe that once we start getting in there getting to the point where we're hitting 3-digit transaction fees on a regular basis, or at least relatively often. We start seeing them relatively often. I think that you're going to see greater and greater pressure to either expand into other existing cryptocurrencies or develop new ones. New ones that are in fact dependent upon proof of work networks, just like Bitcoin. And I believe it's at that point that Bitcoin's going to get really serious about going back to what it was originally intended to be, which was peer-to-peer digital cash and not SWIFT 2.0. Anyway, this first thing I got here, it's on WEF or weforum.org, World Economic Forum. Is it time for a, quote, true global currency? Yeah, we had it in 2009. It's called Bitcoin. The International Monetary Fund's global reserve asset, the special drawing right, is one of the most underused instruments of multilateral cooperation. Turning it into a true global currency would yield several benefits for the global economy and the international monetary system. This year, the world commemorates the anniversaries of 2 key events in the development of the global monetary system. The first is the creation of the International Monetary Fund at the Bretton Woods Conference 75 years ago. The second is the advent 50 years ago of the Special Drawing Right, SDR, the IMF's global reserve asset. When it introduced the SDR, the fund hoped to make it, quote, the principal reserve asset in the international monetary system. This remains an unfulfilled ambition. Indeed, the SDR is one of the most underused instruments of international cooperation. Dogecoin gets more traffic. Nonetheless, better late than never. Turning the SDR into a true global currency would yield several benefits for the world's economy and monetary system, and the IMF. The idea of a global currency is not new. Prior to the Bretton Woods negotiations, actually, is back in the Bible, or I get, yeah, when they predicted that whole mark of the beast business, yeah, that's global currency. Anyway, continuing. Prior to the Bretton Woods negotiations, John Maynard Keynes suggested the, quote, bancor as the unit of account of his proposed international clearing union. In the 1960s, under the leadership of the Belgian-American economist Robert Triffin, other proposals emerged to address the growing problems created by the dual dollar gold system that had been established at Bretton Woods. The system finally collapsed in 1971. As a result of those discussions, the IMF approved the SDR in 1967 and included it in the Articles of Agreement 2 years later. Although the IMF's issuance of SDRs resembles the creation of national money by central banks, the SDR fulfills only some of the functions of money. True, SDRs are a reserve asset, and thus a store of value. They are also the IMF's unit of account, but only central banks, mainly in developing countries, though also in developed economies, and a few international institutions, use SDRs as a means of exchange to pay each other. The SDR has a number of basic advantages, not the least that IMF can use it as an instrument of international monetary policy in a global economic crisis. In 2009, for example, the IMF issued $250 billion in SDRs to help combat the downturn, following a proposal by the G20. Most importantly, SDRs could also become the basic instrument to finance IMF programs. Until now, the fund has relied mainly on quota, capital increases, and borrowing from member countries. But quotas have have tended to lag behind global economic growth. The last increase was approved in 2010, but the U.S. Congress agreed to it only in 2015, and loans from member countries, the IMF's main source of new funds, particularly during crises, are not true multilateral instruments. The best alternative would be to turn the IMF into an institution fully financed and managed in its own global currency, a proposal made several decades ago by Jacques Polak, or then the fund's leading economist, and I'm not kidding, that Jacques Polak. One simple option would be to consider the SDRs that countries hold but have not used as quote deposits at the IMF, which the fund can use to finance its lending to countries. This would require a change in the Articles of Agreement because SDRs currently are not held in regular IMF accounts. The fund could then issue SDRs regularly, or better still, during crises, as in 2009. In the long term, the amount issued must be related to the demand for foreign exchange reserves. Various economists and the IMF itself have estimated that the fund could issue 200 to 300 billion in SDRs per year. Moreover, this would spread the financial benefits, seigniorage of issuing the global currency across all countries. At present, these benefits accrue only to issuers of national or regional currencies that are currently used internationally, particularly the US dollar and the euro. More active use of SDRs would also make the international monetary system more independent of the US monetary policy. One of the major problems of the global monetary system is that the policy objectives of the US as the issuer of the world's main reserve currency are not always consistent with overall stability in the system. In any case, different national and regional currencies could continue to circulate alongside growing SDR reserves, and a new IMF substitution account would allow central banks to exchange their reserves for SDRs, as the U.S. first proposed back in the 1970s. SDRs could also potentially be used in private transactions and to denominate national bonds, but, as the IMF pointed out in its report to the board in 2018, these market SDRs, which would turn the unit into fully fledged money, are not essential for the reforms proposed here. Nor would SDRs need to be used as a unit of account outside of the fund. The anniversaries of the IMF and the SDR in 2019 are causes for celebration, but they also represent an ideal opportunity to transform the SDR into a true global currency that would strengthen the international monetary system. Policymakers should seize it. Let me see, when was this thing actually written? Oh, wow, it's old. Ha ha ha. I don't know how I came across it then. Somebody must have posted it in response of something else, but this was authored in April 8th of 2019. And I mean, just to give you an idea of how lax these guys are, here we are damn near 2 years later, and their SDR is still a nothing. You know, but they I would imagine we're looking the economic crisis and issues that we're currently facing in the face. Meaning that they were observing it in development, and they were saying, hey, you know what? There's going to be a solution necessary for this, because obviously there's going to be a big old liquidity crunch coming up. And so, we're going to take this opportunity to try and encourage the international community to transition over to the SDR as their primary unit of account and quote-unquote money. You know, so this is not the first time that these people have tried to exercise their shit, you know. And I think that we are going to continue to see attempts like this. This, again, it's kind of old, but not really. I mean, you know, we tend to view crypto in really, really short terms and time intervals wise, because so much shit happens so quickly here. You know, I mean, it is a global market, so there's always something happening somewhere. But at the same time, in contrast, it really hasn't been all that long. There's been one presidential election since then, you know, and not even a full term, and we're not even fully into a full year of a first term. So, you know, there again, it's not really been all that long since the IMF was making those noises, or the World Economic Forum, that is, was making those noises. And look at where we are right now. We've had a global pandemic to account for a massive drop in shipments of imports and exports going to and fro various places on the planet that were happening because of a lot of relationships that existed for decades and decades and decades beforehand, but are no longer viable. You know, for whatever international trade sanction or whatever, some change happened when people's contracts needed to be renegotiated, and some people got asked out, as happens. Anyway, I got this thing here. It's on Coindesk.com. Federal Reserve's Powell says CBDCs need to coexist with cash. Fucking. And this is by Nathan D. Camillo, and it was authored on March 18th, 2021 at 11:17 PDT. But yes, penis. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said Thursday central bank digital currencies will need to coexist with cash. Speaking at a virtual payments conference hosted by the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, Powell cited a report on CBDCs from the Bank for International Settlements and a group of 7 central banks, including the Fed. Quote, one of the key principles highlighted in this report is that a CBDC needs to coexist with cash and other types of money in a flexible and innovative payment system, Powell said. Quote, improvements in the global payment system will come not just from the public sector, but from the private sector as well. Powell added that the Fed Board of Governors is conducting experiments on CBDCs along with the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, which is working researchers at the prestigious Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In recent months, Powell has emphasized several times that the U.S. would not act fast on issuing a digital dollar because of the physical dollar's status as the global reserve currency. The latest comment, though, is in line with Powell's previous remarks about the Fed talking about taking the prospects for a digital dollar seriously. Powell has said that the Fed will engage with the public on the topic in 2021 and will seek congressional approval before issuing one. CBDCs are an early-stage payments innovation that governments hope can increase payments efficiency and lower costs by running them on blockchains. The details on CBDCs are still murky, and detractors argue most transactions today involve money that's already digital. There's a fear some governments may use CBDCs for increased financial surveillance. At the moment, it looks like the U.S. could favor privacy in its CBDC development. Yeah, bullshit. Whatever temporary implementations that they suggest they will engage in, it's very clear to me at least that the goal is very, very simple. It is money that they can give to you and take from you on a moment's notice, freeze, suspend access to whatever, tax, discriminate against. Oh, hey, we're going to take care of that whole reparations thing. We're going to just charge white people more taxes than we charge colored people. We're going to resolve that whole disparity business. That's what they intend to do with this shit. Really, you should not be looking at this and not be able to see that. It's very, very plain. Like when you look at things like how they treat people on social media right now. Now imagine that's your fucking wallet. That at any point, and those of you who've been banking or have had a bank account have experienced that they have that kind of control over your bank account already and have had that kind of control for a very long time. But now they're talking about doing it at the monetary unit step, not the bank step. They're like trying to cut out the middleman there, even though they themselves are middlemen. What is hilarious to me, though, is that they assume that they're the only banks that are going to be able to do this kind of thing. And there are plenty of banks that are outside of their direct purview. Things like credit unions. They do have to get licensed and whatnot through things like the CFTC and the SEC and the NYAG and the NYDFS and all that other business. But there are some of them that exist out there that you can work with that will help you out because they have the latitude. They're primarily based on local funding. They aren't based in like Connecticut or some shit like that, or Delaware. That's the state, Delaware. Anyway, but yeah, so CBDCs, I've always considered them to be a joke. And I still consider them to be a joke. If you can imagine an entity like Facebook having control of your money. Oh, hey, you said something we don't like on social media. We're going to terminate access to your bank account. There's another reason why I don't like things like smart homes and smart cars. Imagine you bet on a basketball game or some shit like that, and you lose. And you were doing all of it in the CBDC, and for whatever reason, they decide you go into the hole. The bank actually pays the bookie the CBDC. Now you owe the bank, and the bank holds the note on your car, and the bank holds the note on your mortgage. And you've got your bank account and your wallet with them, and you're circulating their token. They go into the hole to the bookie, you go into the hole to them because they pay off the bookie, and so now you're going to get locked out of your house, you're going to get locked out of your car, you're going to get locked out of your wallet, going to starve to death on the street because the bank owns your everything. And this is why I won't own a fucking electric car, because they're not talking about electric cars. They're talking about like a prison cell that you drive around by basically remote control by satellites. I mean, you have the illusion of control because you're behind the wheel still. But ultimately, at any point in time, Tesla could say, you know what? This guy's just driving a little too fast. We're going to slow him down a little bit. Seize control of your vehicle and slow you down. Or, you know, maybe you said something about Elon Musk that they don't like. You know, accelerate your vehicle to 140 miles an hour and run you right off the cliff. Who's to know, right? Oh, he was suicidal. You know, they have access to your email account, so, you know, they can post up a fucking suicide note and email it to somebody. It's all kosher, man. It looks like it came from you. It's from your email account. They get on your social media and blast all over the place that you're suicidal. It looks like it. Fuck, it's on Facebook. Who has access to Facebook? Nobody has access to Facebook. It must have been that he was suicidal. I mean, really, I'm like living out a fucking Black Mirror episode here or whatever, but that's the capability that's available right now. And they're seeking to extend this level of intrusion and control into your wallet. I mean, like, really, conceptualize that shit, man. It doesn't matter if you're growing vegetables if they've got access to your fucking mortgage. They can just seize control of your property at any time, reissue the deed on the blockchain to somebody else, and you just got evicted. There's no evidence that it was anything any other way. It's their records. It's all digital. You just copy, paste, cut, delete. Not your property no more. That's why paper trails are good. Paper receipts are good. But yeah, I think that they are going to push, and the problem with this is that they are going to push us towards further and further towards the CBDC thing. And as a matter of fact, I don't doubt that for all intents and purposes, you're already spending CBDCs in the form of your national fiat currency. They just changed the names. You know, they changed they changed the law to where something other than a certificate representing a volume of gold can be circulated as money. And after they changed what the money could be, they changed who can issue it. So now it's no longer the U.S. Treasury just signing off on some debt in the name of the public. No. It's the U.S. the U.S. Congress, rather, because they've got the control of the purse strings, going to the Federal Reserve and saying, hey, can you give us a blank check so we can take care of this over here? Thank you. And of course, the Federal Reserve is more than happy to extend that loan. I mean, our Congress people are not economists, so when the Federal Reserve says some terms, a lot of times they're not reviewing that material. Or I'm assuming they're not. There may in fact be so many fucking kickbacks and loopholes and all that other shit that it makes it worth signing the stuff into law. But the point being is, all that changes when you get another cryptocurrency or another system, another currency in place that you can exchange your influence and your will with others with just as easily as you could US dollars. Now it's no longer just them that can change the rules about what represents what. Now it's you. You know, they thought they were all fucking smart going digital and stuff, but that changed the dynamic. It changed the dynamic from one that you can actually monopolize when you're limited to just paper in signing things and moving things physically from one point to another. When you're limited in those ways, hey man, we've got that all buttoned up. We've got that all manipulated and everything. However, there are a lot of costs that are introduced doing it that way. And so, of course, economically, it pencils out to shift it over to digital as much as possible. However, that transition in mediums takes away those barriers to entry. People no longer have to have the vaults to hold the cash. People no longer have to have the trucks and the security guards to move the cash. They don't have to have the vaults and the trucks in order to move assets that are backing the cash other than gold or whatever. The point being is this whole thing has changed now. Once they changed what a dollar represents, or at least, what can act as a dollar. Originally, the US dollar was our currency. And the US dollar had a legal definition, meaning it had to be representing a volume of gold that did exist somewhere. That's what it means for a currency to be quote-unquote backed by gold, is that there is a volume of gold that this is being issued as an IOU against, meaning that at some point in time in the future, if you decide, hey, yo, I want to take my 5,000 US dollars, I want to go to a bursar, I want to turn them in, I want to get my 5 ounces of gold at $1,000 an ounce. And they're going to give it to me because it's mine. That was all taken away from us. And now we circulate IOUs issued by a privately owned bank. Well, when you conceptualize money as being an IOU that's issued by a private bank, suddenly the idea of a certificate, or a receipt rather, representing work already performed by your next door neighbor's kid suddenly becomes just as good. Becomes just as reliable, just as secure. And that's really where we've been at since, I want to say, like the mid-90s. Bitcoin was like perfectly possible back in the mid-90s. Towards the late 90s, you heard about things like folding at home. It could have easily been issuing a token for the work that people were putting toward that. And there you go. You would have had Bitcoin about a decade early. But things folded out the way they have. And in all honesty, I believe that there's a market for that. A currency that is completely separate from any bank or corporate entity, that is mined exclusively by the public, people like you and me, that doesn't give a fuck who you are, doesn't care where you live, treats every transaction the same, and is transacted on a global network of volunteer nodes that are compensated for the very act of participating in consolidating those transactions and recording them in a global ledger. I believe something that fits that description, and it doesn't have any fucking smart contract bullshit, and doesn't have any multi-sig bullshit. I mean, it might have some like op codes that can be performed within it, but everything is processed as received, not delayed and restructured to the maximum profit of the fucking miners. No. Just fucking get the goddamn transaction included. If a cryptocurrency were to be released tomorrow that has the properties that I'm talking about, within 3 years, word of mouth alone, not a single cent spent on any kind of commercialism, not a single media entity, none of that, just word of mouth. Maybe an interview here and there, just, somebody asks you for one. Not going out there and petitioning people for one. But then within 3 years, Bitcoin will hit some apex where people are having to pay thousands of dollars for a fucking transaction fee. People just give up on using it. To be like, why am I doing this when I can spend 5 cents over there on Bitcoin Cash, get the same fucking transaction done? Do all the wonderful, wonderful bullshit with the colored tokens and the permission side chains and all that. Do all that on top of it if I want to, but it's going to cost me 5 cents. Be just as secure, be just as final, be just as settled. It cost me 5 cents versus $5,000. I mean, really, would you pay a transaction fee of $5,000 if you didn't have to? Fuck no. It's because you're intelligent. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down with some music. And somebody said something about us mellowing out. And, we started it with Carnivore, and although the vast majority of the songs that we played on the last music break were kind of slower, not really the most aggressive stuff that we play, it wasn't necessarily slow okay, I'm gonna take care of it, and to fix it and resolve the issue, here it is, Death Angel, Seemingly Endless Time, here on Coin Metal. And that was Dope with Fuck the Police. And so, yeah. Anywho, let's see. We covered the International Monetary Fund business, and I don't know that we actually ever got to this one. Yeah, actually we did. Yeah, we did. The Federal Reserve's pal says CBDCs will need to coexist with cash. What he's basically saying there, in my view, is that there is no way to completely extricate us from the US dollar, or Federal Reserve note as it now actually is represented by. There is no way to extricate us from the paper note system and transition us straight on over to CBDCs. And the funny part about this is that what he's actually saying here, if you know how to listen to what he's saying, is that people are going to stop using bank accounts. They're going to stop using Visa cards. They're going to stop using all digital forms of currency that are issued by the Federal Reserve. They're only going to circulate in US dollars and checks, probably. Or Federal Reserve notes. Paper notes. Because the thing is that all the little controls that they want to apply to our transactions and our commerce are just going to interfere too much. Create too much PETA. Pain in the ass for those who don't know. And it is to that extent. I got this next one here. It's on Coindesk.com. Could a digital dollar compete on privacy? Fed Chair Powell hints it might, i.e. it won't. This is by Benjamin Powers and Mark Hochstein, so double penis. And this is actually authored on February 12th, 2020, so I don't know why it came up here, but we're going to go with it anyway because it was probably a tag on one of the other articles that we covered. So, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has given advocates of financial privacy a glimmer of hope and hinted at how the U.S. might competitively position a future digitized dollar. In testimony before Congress this week, Powell was asked whether the Fed had any, quote, visibility into China's progress developing a central bank digital currency. Quote, yes, we certainly have that, Powell said, but they're in a completely different institutional context. For example, the idea of having a ledger where you know everybody's payments, that's not something that would be particularly attractive in the United States context. It's not a problem in China. These were welcome words to those spooked not only by authoritarian China's approach, but also the potential privacy risks posed by Libra, the proposed digital currency originated by Facebook at a company that has paid billions in fines for abusing customer data. Quote, Powell implied that any digital currency implemented in the U.S. would have to be privacy-preserving or privacy-respecting, and not provide another method of surveillance, a la the Chinese government's plan for a CBDC that provides the government with a backdoor to surveil transactions, said Elizabeth M. Ranieris, a fellow at Harvard University's Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society. Quote, "This should be reassuring to Americans who otherwise find themselves increasingly at risk of widespread government surveillance through their mobile location data, facial recognition systems, and law enforcement access to social media activities," Ranieris said in an email. Rainey Reitman, Chief Program Officer at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, similarly approved of Powell's acknowledging, quote, "the very real risks of attempting to create a state-run cryptocurrency here in the United States. Quote, records relating to your financial transactions can hold clues to everything from your medical conditions to your political affiliations to your location at a given time," Reitman said in an email. Quote, "As we look at cryptocurrencies and an overall societal shift towards digitizing our financial transactions, it's vital that we build privacy values into both the technology and the regulatory systems." You can't have both. Not in the digital realm. If you are regulating shit, then the fact that it's private doesn't mean anything. You're still stopping things that maybe you shouldn't be able to stop. Continuing on. Proceeding cautiously. To be sure, Powell indicated the Fed is still in the early stages of researching digital currencies and was non-committal on whether the central bank would ever issue one. Quote, "Having a single government currency at the heart of the financial system is something that has served us well. It is a very, very basic thing. It really hasn't been in question, and I think before we move away from that, we should really understand what we're doing," he said. Quote, "Preserving the centrality of a central, widely accepted currency that is accepted and trusted is an enormously important thing." Absolutely correct. There's a big conceptual jump that every currency unit has to jump. Anyway, continuing. This was consistent with his prior remarks as recently as December, which came as another relief for Ranieris. Quote, "Realistically, this means it may be many more years before the Fed reveals any details of its research and developing on a digital dollar to date, as we hope there would be many rounds of public consultation before any kind of official announcement or rollout," she said. Quote, "That is, unless we really do go the way of China and implement this top-down." Meaning change the currency unit without you even knowing. Continuing. Selling point. But Powell was not the first Washington veteran to bring up privacy in the context of a potential digital dollar. Christopher Giancarlo, the former chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, CFTC, and now an advocate for an electronic greenback, touted U.S. constitutional protections. Touted U.S. constitutional protections as a differentiator. In a recent video interview with CoinDesk, Giancarlo described a scenario where a digital dollar was competing against an electronic yuan and against Libra. Quote, "One government is going to want to know every transaction, especially transactions to political opponents, freedom movements," he said on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Quote, "One of these operators is going to want to know every commercial transaction to know whether you're shopping with Target or you're shopping with Nordstrom. And one of these providers is going to be constitutionally restricted from collecting either of that information, and that one is going to be the U.S. government. Hence, people could see a US dollar, digital dollar, as your information being more secure, not less, than a central bank currency offered by other governments or commercial vendors. Giancarlo said. The race is on. China kicked its work on a digital yuan into high gear last year following the unveiling of the Libra project, which Beijing officials specifically cited as a competitive threat to fiat currencies. Despite his tentativeness this week, Powell told lawmakers that Libra, quote, really lit a fire under the Fed to investigate the possibilities of CBDCs. Quote, it was a bit of a wake-up call that this is coming fast and could come in a way that is quite, widespread and systematically important fairly quickly. But if you use one of these big tech networks like Libra did, Powell told lawmakers. That remark suggests that the Fed is even more motivated to explore a so-called, quote, Fed coin by the prospect of private rivals to the primacy of the US dollar among the lines of Facebook's Libra than it is by CBDCs like the digital yuan, Ramirez said. But if Libra was a catalyst, it shouldn't be a model for Washington, she said. Quote, given the all-time high levels of mistrust in Facebook, which is still perceived to be at the helm of Libra, despite the Libra Association's formal independence, the Fed would be wise to focus on a more privacy-respecting approach to digital money to compete with the likely bells and whistles that Facebook will provide, including the ease of in-platform use, the shiny UX, etc., Ramirez said. Yeah, so my apologies, I was kind of drifting there towards the end. Not entirely all that exciting here. Yeah, the fact of the matter is that Facebook making any kind of move or mention, let me be clear here. This to me is how I read the priorities of these individuals. And according to my perspective, the only time they had anything to say about cryptocurrencies was maybe back in I want to say 2010 through maybe 2012. That was the period where they really had to make up their mind how they wanted to treat cryptocurrencies, because they couldn't actually do anything at that point. It indicates that, to me at least, and from their subsequent priorities, as indicated by their statements here, that they are still not focused appropriately on this stuff. They had an opportunity to stand in its way, and now their only real option when it comes to crypto is to let it happen. It literally is the only option left. With these other countries talking about tensing up on it, it would represent a clear advantage for us to do so, because even though some of the governments that we object to on some fundamental levels at least are rejecting these currencies, there are others that, while they say they are against it, are tacitly approving it by not doing anything about it. And yes, I'm talking about China here. With all their bloviating and all their bullshit, supposedly 60% of the planet's hashing power is coming from provinces in China. I mean, what does that tell you? They're far more oppressive than we are here in the United States, and even though we are kind of oppressive here, I'm getting even a little more so. See, I think that represents Chinese influence in our government. I think there's a big mistake where people interpret the idea that there's so much mining happening in China, that they misinterpret that. They look at it as in terms of disrupting the United States' primacy in the world economy. And the fact of the matter is, we've still got like 3 or 4 of the biggest economies on the planet within the continental United States. And the economy isn't represented by the currency. I mean, the currency flow just demonstrates how large the economy is. But you can just as easily swap out any currency unit and it will work just as good, if not better, depending on the currency unit itself, within that economy. It's just there's enough people, there's enough commerce going on there, that regardless of the medium of exchange, there would be that level of commerce occurring in those places. Well, at least I would like to think so. So like New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco, those 3 areas, they're among the top 10 biggest economies on the planet. And again, I'm pretty sure that's in whole terms, but the way they find it out is determining by how much in US dollar volume is being transacted there. Now, when you open it up to cryptocurrencies being able to be freely operating in the United States without any kind of licenses or any of that other bullshit, just setting up shop, doing your thing. If it fucking works, it works. If it doesn't, you're fucking legally liable. I mean, it's really that simple. You know, if through negligence or some other issue you create some massive material loss, you're going to be civilly liable at the least and criminally liable at the worst. And that doesn't need to change as far as laws are concerned either. I mean, loss is loss. If it can be demonstrated, which if it's got a blockchain associated with it, it can down to the fucking nanosecond, then we can establish who the responsible parties were, and we can establish who the impacted or aggrieved parties were. It's very, very plain. It's in a public fucking ledger. It can be looked up by anybody, verified by anybody, everybody. Anyway, I've got a little bit more I wanted to get into on this stuff. And I'm trying to find out. Let's see, where is it here? No. Although that is an interesting one. Here we go. And this one too is on CoinDesk. And this is by Nathaniel Whitmore. How CBDCs give absolute control to central banks. And this is authored March 19th, 2020. Oh, shish kebab. Sorry, this one is a fucking video, apparently. Well, let's see. On the bullet points, it was U.S.-China talks, U.S. spending coming back, a virtual casino hiring in real life people. Main discussion looks at central bank digital currencies and why they're so appealing for bankers, especially compared to cash. NLW discusses recent comments from Fed Chairman. Yeah, we got all that business. So basically, like, they're covering what we covered, only they're adding Augustin Carstens. And I've never noted that man to be terribly credible when it comes to economics or cryptocurrencies in particular. And I say cryptocurrencies in particular. And I can't recall if it was him originally or if it was somebody else, but I back like three Twitter accounts ago, I used to get in these debates with this guy, and I had no idea, but he was some, like, knowing or scholar, some big economic scholars, fucking name recognition, all that other bullshit. I probably would have recognized his name if I read books by him or was in college or whatever. I don't know. The point being, he was well known outside of crypto, and it's either him or Gerard, some Gerard. I want to say it's Gerard actually, but I think I had the same kind of conversations with this guy, and he's shaking hands with Christine Lagarde, She's not very credible either, I don't think. But yeah, so these people, they're just people, and I think it's a trite point, you say it, they're just people, and it doesn't sound like it really means anything. But when you're talking about the context of like Dogecoin, who is Christine Lagarde to Dogecoin? She's fucking nobody. Unless, of course, she's a Dogecoin owner or a miner. She may be, I don't know. But that's like the type of leveling socially and whatnot. Christine Lagarde is absolutely nobody. She has no cred within the Dogecoin community. Unless, of course, she's been riding along under some fucking pseudonym, and she's actually a big-ass Doge holder. She's got 20 billion of them. Nobody knows. So the point being is that's the type of leveling that cryptocurrencies give us. The number of Bitcoin people that have over 10,000 Bitcoin, teeny tiny number of people on the planet have that volume of Bitcoin. There are a few, but they're richer in terms of crypto than anybody else on the planet. They make Bezos look like a twit. But this is the new context, the new economic contexts that cryptocurrencies provide for us. And they're not limited to the ones that exist right now. It's one of the key points of my show is to indicate to you guys that this race is not over. There's nothing finished. There's nothing really established. Nothing has really changed since 2009. You can still draft all the fucking software you want and re-release it to everybody else, and if they choose to adopt it, it is theirs to do, and nobody can tell them they can't. Now, of course, there is some free software out there that does do things that are otherwise required by law to be licensed activities and performed by certified and licensed and regulated individuals, registered and shit. And knowing if you are actually conducting those activities is up to you. But the thing is, in crypto, there's really no need to. At its heart, most of crypto is still peer-to-peer digital cash. And is transacted as such among various parties out there. And the only difference between them and you is your choice to engage yourself in those activities and to transact in those coins. But that's it. If you were to decide tomorrow, I'm going to host a node on my desktop, I'm going to associate a wallet on my phone with that node, and I'm going to set it up with a variety of different cryptocurrencies, and I'm going to go out and volunteer my services to people in my neighborhood in exchange for these cryptocurrencies, whether it be Bitcoin or Litecoin or Monero or whichever one works out for the best for us. And in that way, I'm going to be propagating the cryptocurrencies that I most support. And we are going to see what I'm talking about. I mean, people like you are going to go out and do exactly that. And especially in places where they don't have access to US dollars, but oddly enough, they do have access to internet. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down with some music. As far as where to go, I'm feeling a little bit of old school. Somebody was asking for some classic rock earlier, and I think I can fulfill that request and still stay metal as fuck. And so here it is, Judas Priest, Electric Eye, here on Coin Metal. And that was Death Clock with Death Harmonic. And it is with that I'd like to close out this episode. Thank you very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate your support. We will be back again on Monday, and hopefully I'll be back to jiu-jitsu by then. So until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework! And watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And as far as our last dance is concerned, I actually had one running, and I'm just going to start it over again, because I really like this song, and I think it was appropriate with where we were going on that. So we're going to go with Clutch, Escape from the Prison Planet, Last Dance, here on Coin Metal. Thank you again for listening, and y'all have an excellent weekend. Good night.